Okay, good morning, everybody. We're going to start this session, so please take your seats. My name is Josh Katzen from Camera. It's my honor this morning to introduce Deputy Prime Minister Gideon Sa'ar. Gideon Sa'ar is the head of another Israeli party, Tikva Hadasha, New Hope. And he's currently the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of Justice. And should the present government still be in existence a year from this summer, he'll become the Foreign Minister. I don't know what the over-under is on that, but he'll tell us perhaps. Gideon Sa'ar has been in Knesset since 2002, and he's had many government jobs, Minister of Education, Minister of the Interior, Cabinet Secretary. He's been working in the government for a long time. And he's also been involved as a National Security Fellow at the INSS, which we work with a lot. He's going to be interviewed this morning by Attila Somfalvi, and anybody named Attila is a friend of mine. He's the lead anchor at Ynet News, Yediot News, a political commentator on the Jewish world. He's a diplomatic reporter, political reporter, and is the main host of television broadcasts on the Ynet News site. The podcast, the headline is his, as is the personal podcast, The Barricade. So what we're going to do is have an interview for about 20 minutes, then we'll have some questions. Gideon, Attila, please.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Minister, for coming. Thank you, everybody, for being with us this morning. I'll try to use this 20 minutes that we have to cover as much subjects and issues that we can. So first of all, I'll start with what you said yesterday at the farewell party from Attorney General Mandelblit, right? And you said there, and I quote, "I never believed and never thought that the democratic system in Israel can be in danger. Unfortunately, in the last few years, I felt that what has been untouchable and undebatable in the past isn't like this in the present." Mr. Sa'ar, what did you mean by that? Israeli democracy is in danger?
I was very clear that state is working by institutions, and state institutions were under attack. They are still under attack. They were under attack from the government itself. Now they are under attack from the opposition. But I believe there is a huge difference between a will, which is not only legitimate, but also it is necessary to reform institutions and to change it for the good, between that and a systematic, organized delegitimization process. And this is what we saw, unfortunately, since the
Since before the trial, actually.
Since the legal procedures against former Prime Minister began.
How deep did it go?
And there were certain things that were in the past not in disputes, but an agreed principles regardless of differences of political views and affiliation, like the independence of the judiciary, the independence of the prosecution. And now they are not anymore, and it is enough to hear it in the plenum of the Knesset and every day in the Israeli media. And I felt that by forming this government, after 2.5 years of political instability in this country, we are a bit safer, but I don't think it is over. It is still here, and we shouldn't. By the way, Israeli democracy is a miracle. First, the majority of the people came to here not from democratic countries. Second, it is very tough to preserve democracy under a consistent security threat, terror, wars, whatever. Third, we don't have a constitution. So taking all that into consideration, it is half a miracle at least that we were able to preserve a vital democracy all this time. But what I'm saying is only we shouldn't take democratic regime as something which is clear in the pocket, and we should preserve and reform our institutions.
As Justice Minister, you went into your office and you saw what? How deep did it go?
Entering to the Justice Ministry last June was like visiting in a place after a hurricane. Majority of the, I would say, top officials was not in place. They didn't nominate state attorney. They didn't nominate so many places were without a head for 2 years, 2.5 years, and that caused a terrible problem, and that influenced, of course, what the people who are serving this country in the ministries felt. And even in the short time during the Bibi Gantz government, a little bit more than 7 months, this ministry, the top officials were not filled. So also in the time where there were nominations in other ministries, in the Justice Ministry, they skip it because Bibi opposed it. And now, I think this week, we restore it. After 8 months, I nominate Attorney General, State Attorney, two deputy to the Attorney General, 4 judges to the Supreme Court, and much more than that.
So it's not that we lack problems here or crisis, but in the past few weeks we dealt with the Pegasus crisis and the police crisis. So yesterday, a report has been filed by the special committee, and they say there was no wrongdoing by the police. And the question is whether you think, as Justice Minister, that there should be national inquiry conducted in this matter.
You need minimal infrastructure of facts and evidence in order to form such a committee. It's not that I oppose it, but you need to have minimal factual infrastructure for that. I don't think you have it. As yesterday, the committee that checked it reported, there was no wrongdoing in checking the publication of 2 weeks ago. It is not over because they have a lot of other things to check that lasted years. It is clear to me that there are things to be proved in terms of procedures and other respects, but it is clear today that what we thought reading the newspaper 15 years ago is probably not true. So, and yesterday the newspaper itself commented that they will check themselves. By the way, it is good that we have free press and that investigates, and it's okay also that there are mistakes, and they also should check themselves. It's not, it's not that now we. It's part of life, but until now, from what we know, there is not enough infrastructure to do the most dramatic act.
So that's
But
it.
if it will be revealed, by the way, there are two institutions that checking this issue today. State controller, which check all the authorities on the issue, and also the committee headed by the deputy of the Attorney General. And it is clear that I have total respect and I trust those two institutions, and it is too bad that we hear people and also people that represents in the Knesset that from day one don't trust these institutions, that they're sincerely checking what happened.
Are you worried as a minister, as the justice minister, of the fact that many Israelis, a majority of Israelis do not trust the Supreme Court, they do not trust the politicians, they do not trust the police? That's a problem for democracy.
Totally agreed. We have a problem of trust in all Israeli institutions. And first of all, we need to work hard to restore trust. It's not a mission for the public, it's a mission for ourselves, leading these important agencies and ministries and so on. But it is also an issue, and I think it's common in other states as well, as some of the people here can approve. But it's the public discourse and the way we speak about issues, institutions, that influences the level of trust of the public.
I'm going to go back to politics in a second, but the United States and the Western powers are close to signing a new deal with Iran. And Israel has declared that it's totally against it and it's not going to influence us on vis-a-vis Iran. The question is, don't you think that you as a government were too quiet in the discourse with the United States, with the administration? Because Prime Minister Netanyahu was very, loud, if I can put it softly. He was very loud in putting out there the fact that Israel is against an agreement. So now
The question is whether his policies were successful. Quitting from the deal without influencing by clauses that were in the agreement other superpowers to quit as well, or to do things. One thing. Second, whether these policies were successful by blocking the nuclear project of Iran or not. We know the truth today. It is not that we are quiet, we're not quiet, not with statesmen, not with the dialogue between us and the Americans and other nations who are involved, but it is also accurate to say we have certain limit of influence on other countries and how they define their interests. And we have our interests, and we will serve our interests, and we should maintain this dialogue today with the American administration in order to guarantee certain aspects of our national interests. We have the same aim or the same object of preventing Iran being nuclear. There is a certain disagreement. What is the best way to do it? We think from all that we know today, it is a bad deal. It is a short time bad deal. And we say it publicly, we say it in our dialogue with the American administration. And if ultimately this deal will be signed, we should continue this dialogue. I hope it will not happen, but I need to be realistic as well. We will have another dialogue of what will be the consequences of a different scenarios in the future. And we need to coordinate. We will not find a better friend than the United States of America.
And
No matter how much we will search, we will not find a better friend than the United States of America.
An agreement can also gain some time for Israel to arm up and to strengthen its power. And the question is, and you are also a deputy prime minister, so attacking Iran is tangible, is an option, is realistic?
First of all, it is not helping by any means to speak publicly about it. This is my belief.
It's among friends here.
Yeah, I know.
It's mishpuche.
Israel has a very clear policy of preventing enemies in our region to have nuclear capabilities, to have nuclear weapons. This is clear. And we used our right for self-defense in the past with regards to other nations that were about to achieve nuclear capabilities like Iraq, like Syria. And this is something that we see as our duty for our citizens. And of course, we are working in order to have whatever we can in order to meet this obligation to our public. And we are doing it in these very days, I would say more than in the past. But I don't think it is wise to elaborate more than that.
Okay. One last question before I open up the floor for questions. For many years, Minister, the ultra-Orthodox controlled all that is Jewish here in Israel. Now, you make changes in this government. We talk about the kotel, the conversion. Where do you stand regarding these issues?
I just signed the agreements last June, so it is clear where we stand. We, for example, supported.
Personally, I mean, reaching out to the Jewish,
supported. No,
to the Jewish diaspora in the States.
I believe that one segment in Israeli society shouldn't possess monopoly over Judaism. This is something very important. I respect all streams, I respect everyone, but one segment of the Israeli society cannot possess a monopoly over these issues. It doesn't mean that within 1 year we should open all the fronts. We have coalition agreements. We took some commitments on ourselves. 2 days ago, the Ministerial Committee on Legislation approved the bill that Minister Kahana brought on conversion, and we should promote it, and I think it is right to promote it, but we should be very wise with how to promote these issues. And I think it is something, this conversion bill, and what we believe that rabbis of cities should have this authority. We agreed we should promote it, and to promote whatever we agreed upon.
All right. Let's have some questions from the public.
My name is David Schimmel with the Conference of Presidents.
David.
They're not the first one in the last few days who said, just judge how effective the forward-leaning previous administration was to objecting to the JCPOA because it failed in their efforts to block it. Would you apply the same criteria today? The different approach taken, if this doesn't effectively block this new agreement, would you also consider it a failure?
If it will not block the Iranian nuclear project, if it will not block the Iranian attempts.
The agreement itself. I mean, the Israeli pressure, I understood it well, the Israeli pressure upon the United States and the Western countries,
No,
the pressure is going to fail probably.
Well, I just said, we have a certain limitations. We are not in contradiction to what certain people still believe. We are not running the world. We are not running superpowers. We should do our utmost in order to promote our national interests, but I think we should also be humble. Not in our objectives, but in our limitations as a nation. And we should do our utmost in order to protect our national interests with regard to other superpowers. We can do our utmost in order to convince. But what I meant previously is when you take a certain strategy and you should understand the consequences of a certain action. Do you block by doing things, or do you push it forward? You should think very, very carefully on all the consequences. This is what I meant.
Hi there.
Go ahead, Sheila.
Hi, thank you. I'm Sheila Katz, the CEO of National Council of Jewish Women. I have the Supreme Court on my mind today because we're expecting in the United States to hear the name of the nominee as early as today, and it's likely going to be the first Black woman nominated to the Supreme Court. I saw that you successfully got 4 new people to the Supreme Court, including 2 women, the first Muslim and the first Mizrahi woman. And so I'm just curious to hear...
And the Attorney General also.
All right, there you go. And I'm curious to understand whether diversity is a part of what you're looking for in justices, and how you go about navigating that in, I'm sure, a very contentious situation of not everybody wanting that.
Yes, diversity is very important in a heterogenic society, as the Israeli society is. And diversity is important also in the context we just touched of the level of trust of different groups in the society on the institutions. It influences in a way. So it is, of course, it is not instead of excellency. The most important thing is the quality. Of course, it is important when you elect judge for the Supreme Court, what is views, judicial views, excellency, but also if you have an excellent candidate that can contribute to diversity, it is very important to do it. We didn't have, even though we are almost a 74 years country, we didn't have a lady in the position of the Attorney General, which is the most important, I think it is number one civil servant in terms of its importance. At least one of the top positions. And I nominated a lady which I thought it is the most qualified candidate. It is also important to do it when you elect judges to the Supreme Court. It is important after 74 years that we have a Muslim judge in our Supreme Court. This country is not justified. We fight against it, but we are blamed to be an apartheid country. So it is significant, but
It's a little
by
harsh.
our enemies, and we have a big, something like 20% of the population, Arabs. The majority among our Arab citizens, something like 80% are Muslims. So these facts, they are meaningful. We elect an excellent candidate. If he was not excellent, we wouldn't do that. But it is important to do it when you can do it.
Erwin.
I just want, question back here. Jason Oceans, president of Alpha Epsilon Pi. Thank you for being here. My question to you regarding domestic housing. There are so many dilapidated houses in Israel from the 20s, 30s, and 40s. I know there's a great concern about earthquakes and seismic activity. I just want to know how we're going to enforce all those building laws, municipal-wise and obviously countrywide. It's quite difficult, I understand.
It is a tough task. When I was Minister of Education, I invested in a plan of building schools or improving construction on certain schools in the periphery where a phenomenon of earthquake can be most dangerous, and you must promote it differently between different parts in Israel, because we know where it will be more dangerous if it will happen, or if and when it will happen. It's probably more when than if. We need also to promote a national plan that will make it, I would say, economical to invest in reconstructing in the periphery and gaining by that more houses or more apartments, for example. We did it in the center of our country. It was not so successful in the periphery, so we must find a formula how it will be beneficial to do it for entrepreneurs and people in the real estate business to do it in the periphery.
Okay, we have one more question. Is the microphone live? Thank you.
Minister, I thought your comments about trust in institutions were important, which leads to my question. I served in Canada as the Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada, which included also the responsibility as Chief Prosecutor. At the end of my term, I felt that the positions of Minister of Justice and Attorney General should be divided and that there should be an independent Chief Prosecutor. The first recommendation was not accepted. The second was. I'm wondering with respect to Israel about establishing an independent prosecutorial authority, which I think would improve trust in institutions.
First of all, in Israel, it is independent. Myself, I don't have a stand on prosecution. It's the professional people in my ministry dealing with that. I don't have powers on that, but I consider to do other changes, and I will do it with the new Attorney General with regard of certain powers of the Attorney General. Because in Israel, the Attorney General is not only heading prosecution, but it is also legal advisor of the government. There are problems with certain aspects of that. I want to change it, but I want to change it for the good, because to change it, you should very carefully understand the consequences and find the right model to do it, and this is what I will do during the next months.
Attila, do you want to wrap
Yeah,
it up, please?
one more political question, and we'll sum it up. Before we got on stage, Minister, we just found out that one of the ministers in the government is going to resign and go back to the Knesset. It's Eli Avidar, who, I should put it gently, was problematic since whenever. What's the influence of this resignation?
Well, I just heard it from you before.
It's a good source.
Yeah. I didn't know that, and he didn't tell me. He's a friend, he's a colleague. I'm sorry for that. No doubt that when someone is leaving the government, it's not helping the government. But
Are you worried it's
but
gonna? It's a hit?
I don't think that Eli Avidar, as I know him, will topple this government because he was one of those who worked hard in order that it will be formed. I know he have criticism. He will probably be more independent in the Knesset as MK, but I don't think he will topple the government. But I don't want to hide. We have difficulties. We have certain difficulties over the last weeks. It influenced our work in the Knesset during the last weeks. If to compare it to what the country faced during the last 2.5 years, we are better off. But we have difficulties we must overcome. And we have one thing that we must be very clear to all the partners in the coalition. We have disagreements, but when we have government decisions or ministerial committees' decision on issues, all ministers, all factions, when we go to the parliament, should back it. We argue in the government, but when we have a decision, this is the #1 rule. If we will know to respect it, this government will last. If certain factions will continue not to understand the meaning of it, we will have serious problem.
Minister Gideon Saar, thank you so much.
Thank you.
On that pregnant note, we will say thank you to our interviewer, Attila Samfalvi, and to Assistant Prime Minister Gideon Saar. Gideon, we have a presentation for you. Yeah, saying. It's a framed version of the saying, Laman Zion Lo Echsha, for the city. You know this one. Okay. Well, here it is. It will remind you. It is the same Bible. Okay. Thank you very much.
I got a quick photo of Diane Lobert chair. Mr. Minister. Please. A little bit to the left, Malcolm. Josh, you want in?
We don't want to ever look at these pictures.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Good work, guys.
Thank you. Thanks, Josh. Well done.
Gideon, thanks a million.
We're going to be leaving for the Knesset shortly. I'd ask everyone to please go up to the lobby of the Inbal. We have Knesset security in the Inbal who's going to tag everybody here, so it'll expedite our entry into the Knesset. So again, please, before you board the buses, be sure that you get a tag.
Did you mention passports?